really kind of excited to share this message. Today, I'm at the Park City Hall, where my whole team is in town. So the DC team, along with the district team that works out of Ogden, we're up here in the first district in Park City having a whole workshop. We spent the morning talking about how we came to what the mission, kind of your mission statement is. Now, mission statements are oftentimes something you etch into a wall. Sometimes you put it, you brand it, and you don't really, you don't oftentimes do much with it. I have learned a lot from my time in the consulting world, and a lot of the social impact consulting world that I did, on how to go about actually using it. And while I'm only 5 months in, I do sincerely feel like, as I read this, and I'm going to read it verbatim to you all, there's areas that I've been able to embrace this, and I hope and will continue to pursue doing that continually. The crux of my comments are going to be about how I've taken my time in social impact. You recently just heard from Jacob Allen and Ben Steffen. Remember what they say, because they're real experts. Me, I'm now a politician, so hopefully I can be somewhat inspiring, and you could know that, how my head works as I interact in the world's most toxic and tumultuous and bureaucratic system that exists. I love my time in the social impact space. Always felt like I was achieving really good, positive progress with companies that I was working with, organizations. Sometimes it's tough to be involved with, but I hope that you hear from me a message of hope, and there is really, really good people that want to accomplish the right objectives and right results that do exist in Congress. It's not what you oftentimes hear always on our media outlets. They are paid by the as ostentatious as they can get. They are paid for clicks, and there's a lot better workable people back in Washington than you'll know. And I love to be able to kind of communicate that message. I'm going to read my mission statement here, and then I'm going to talk through some of the ways that my background in social impact I've tried to infuse that into my role in Congress. I'm going to give some examples of some specific items with respect to evidence-based pay for success and evidence-based policymaking. Just examples of how that's also how I'm hopeful that we can infuse that into our policymaking more and more, and then at that point would love to kind of cut off my comments and either hear any questions. I'm more than happy to answer questions, and then we'll keep with the program. But here's my mission statement. Congressman Blake Moore is committed to productivity over partisanship. He seeks to be a credible, conservative voice, communicating optimistically and dynamically about our country's future. He will champion aspirational, pro-growth, and inclusive policies that help the federal government work more like Utah. He will work across the aisle to invest in proper government structures that can yield better outcomes. He will promote good governance, evidence-based policy, and more productive processes. He believes in a capitalist system that promotes service and compassion for the most vulnerable members of our society, and he believes in the power of bipartisanship to strengthen our nation and our discourse. And if any of you are following along with my time in office, you can dissect any of the votes that I've done. You can look at my record, and you can look and see, maybe he says he does what he says, or maybe he doesn't. If we had separate conversations, the things that I would want to communicate to you would be how I'm infusing my time in social impact. So just a quick background in the work that I did, and I'm really glad that Jacob and Ben Steffen got to go before you. I worked closer to those two individuals over the last 5 years than anybody else. And Jacob was a real visionary in establishing a social impact practice in our consulting firm. Ben came on later. After he was hired, I immediately snatched him up on pretty much every project I had the opportunity to, because they are really, really smart thinkers. They think really, really hard about how to set up a structure and a project to get it so we can achieve outcomes. I was a client hand type of person and really loved the interpersonal side of the work. I loved qualitative research, where they were more heavily based in quantitative research. But my shift over to social impact, I'd been at Cicero for about 5 years, and my shift over was because I had so many good experiences being on the board of an adoption agency, in the state of Utah, and doing charity events. And I said to Jacob, I said, I would love to be more involved in some of the work that you're doing. And that was some of the most fulfilling professional experiences that I had. And we did education, we did workforce development, we did homelessness. We put together community events where we were trying to educate funders on their role in making sure that they were kind of influencing organizations and nonprofits to do things more efficiently, right? And so what could a funder sort of establish as their protocol? I want all of our potential grantees to provide a logic model to me, or a theory of change, or what they're actually trying to accomplish, and walk me through their process. So, we were in the nuts and bolts of it. It was not all philanthropic work. It was consultative and, research based, but we knew that the outcomes that we were striving for, improve the real things that we needed to in this world. A lot of it ended up being around the education space. So when I jumped into running for office, which came out of the blue, I found several opportunities, and then once being elected, even more about how to incorporate my world and social impact to the political side. I was speaking at what's called a Lincoln Day dinner. It's during the campaign. And I got to talk, I specifically talked about the good that companies can do, right? And how we can promote a culture of corporations in the US to help solve some of the be mission-driven type of organizations, and help solve some of the major issues. And I would give examples of big financial institutions that can oftentimes get deemed as big finance, and don't care about the little people, and the work that they're doing in their inclusive, or in their corporate social responsibility was helping at-risk teens find entry-level jobs. And that was one of the proudest moments that I had in my time in that profession, of helping those at-risk teens, from opportunity youth from 16 to 24 years old, that were neither working nor in school, helping them find work opportunities. Recently was on a Zoom with Utah nonprofits. I walked them through the giving state, reminding them of the importance of not duplicating their efforts, reminding them of the certain outcomes and the recommendations that came from that report, and how important it is for them to communicate to their nonprofits, how we can do this more effectively. I oftentimes, again, like the Lincoln Day, talking at a town hall, when people are saying, well, what's going to happen with corporate taxes? And for me to be able to have the experience I did in social impact, to speak credibly about, well, here's why I support corporations being able to thrive, is because I know there's a big shift in our industry right now. There's a big shift. Instead of companies making a profit and then using it to go and donate so they can get a tax benefit, which is good. It's a good system to have. And I'm glad that, companies felt that they could do that. And there was a lot of good that came out of that in their time. We're seeing a shift with companies. I have an example. My headphones here. I don't want to go specific to any particular companies per se, but Skull Candy's in my district. My little boy has autism. He's 5 years old. And Skull Candy, this design is from a teenager with autism. And they worked with him on this, and he designed their new line of headphones. Like, that is what I talk about when my entire mission statement for my political positioning is inclusive, right? We don't have to be one or the other in our society. And I'm excited at the way that a lot of our private sector is moving. I'm excited at the way that our investors are moving. And I won't talk because I'm not an expert. I have an investment in impact investing, bringing two worlds together that didn't often really interact. People are finding that a way to, they're deemed as the wealthy of society, and they're finding ways to do it in a sustainable way that goes and lifts up communities. There is good happening, and I hope to be somebody that can go and promote that throughout and not have to pick sides when I go back to Washington. It's just, I've found more opportunities than I ever expected to be able to take that understanding of how our social impact, our mission-driven organizations are getting involved in doing what I believe is the right thing. If I want to talk specifically to pay for success, like there's lots of opportunities. Everybody in Utah likes to talk about the Goldman Sachs and doing preschool and getting outcomes and all that. I'm not going to talk those specifics, but when it's tough as a politician, people track your votes. Organizations will just watch you all the time on like what you're doing, how you're voting, and then will manipulate it and perceive it however they ultimately want to, not knowing the real story. Programs like Pay for Success, I could stand up to any single person that would be critical of me of providing funding in a situation that said, yeah, I know, I also want to reduce our debt. I'm terrified that we're going to just continually raise our debt. We're not going to get our deficits under control. And before I say anything else, no party has the moral authority on this. We are all doing a bad job with this one. And these types of programs give cover to politicians. And I could stand up to anybody that's critical of me and saying, a pay for success model is the proper way to do it. And there's conservative principles built into this that show efficacy. And then all of a sudden, then you're able to reward a group doing it right. If we can find more opportunities for advocacy to give that type of cover to politicians, it's a tough world. I have to run for office every 2 years. And the threat for me in a very conservative district is that somebody will, on the right of me, whatever way you perceive. I love how our Republican Party likes to label people a certain version of some type of conservative. and I hate that. And I'm trying to buck that trend a little bit. But there'll always be these challengers that are going to try to take in a little thing. If you give politicians an opportunity to say a pay for success model is a very conservative principle. A Democrat, somebody on a more liberal, on the more liberal spectrum would be able to say, yeah, but look at what we're trying to accomplish. We're going after education and we're going after these things that are community building. Like they have a message in there. The more we can do to give a broader perspective so politicians can engage in this without the constant threat of getting, losing an election, it helps immensely. I just introduced Keith Allred, who was a former colleague of mine. He was a partner. He's running a civility organization. And what they do is they get input from constituents on certain policy issues, and they work it hard until they take it up to a policymaker and say, look, you have Republicans and Democrats. Here's where they agree. Here's what the ultimate bill could potentially look like. Why don't you go run with it now? That's the kind of cover that you're able to provide. It's a group called Common Sense American. I wasn't planning on talking about it, but there is ways to help politicians in your world on making so we can go and communicate it in a way that is inclusive and we can defend it. Evidence-based policymaking is the last thing I'll mention. You tell any Republican that you're going to run a pilot at the state level or the local level, and you're going to see how it works. And then you're going to bring the results to them and see if we could build it up into a more broad policy perspective. If they don't like that concept, they don't believe in conservative principles. They don't believe in the Constitution. The 10th Amendment wants us to do as much federalism as possible. So there's a big debate right now about preschool and whether it should be universal preschool. Well, Tooele County, I haven't met with the superintendent yet, but I hope to. I just found out from a group the other day that Tooele County, they're going to run a pilot. They're going to check to see if pre-K can be a part of their general school system. I don't have the details on it yet, but I'm going to do it. Like those are the kind of innovative, cool ideas that if you get politicians involved and you're able to show at the local level how it's been effective, then you're again providing that type of cover to be able to communicate it in a way that's effective. That's the message that I ultimately have today. I'm trying to infuse my social impact in the world of politics. There are good groups, good bipartisan groups that I've joined, that I know that they're out there improving government structure, improving modernization of government. And there are so many good principles that could have broad appeal to wherever you are on the political spectrum, that this stuff is worth pursuing. And I just wanted to thank all those of you that are engaged in this and willing to be a part of the solution and not the problem. That's ultimately, I think I've said that a million times, and I mean it, and I really will try to do it as I try to gain more influence back here. So I love my background. I feel like it's very applicable, and I'm really just appreciative of Sorensen Impact, Jeff and Jim and everybody that's involved to allow me to come and just give some brief remarks. And I'll pause there.
Awesome. Thank you, Representative Moore. Are there any questions for those who are listening to this?
Oops, we lost Tiana. I'm guessing she was going to say to this great presentation. Oh, there you're back. We're losing you, Tiana. Are you here?
I am. Can you hear me?
Now we can. Go ahead.
Okay, I was just saying thank you so much to Representative Moore for that amazing insight and just adding more depth and context to his position. It definitely helped me understand more. And so I wanted to open it up to the attendees to see if they had questions. Any questions?
It's like Leslie has one.
Check the chat.
Okay. Sir Moore, I just wanted to say thank you very much for your authenticity and your creativity and your true passion to making real change. I'm not much of a politician, and I don't think our governments have been doing what could or should be done. But you're the first politician I like, so that I know. I just came out of retirement 3 years ago for the purpose and passion of rebuilding and rejuvenating desolate areas in U.S. cities via education, housing, community centers, and employment. And what you've said is exactly what needs to be done. And I hope to help you in any way I can.
Thank you. It is. I'm one of those kind of guys that's like, I don't know the answer. I earned a lot of credibility from people when I say that. This is an area that I'm really passionate about, and I am trying to find angles back in Washington on how to infuse it. As I talk more about it, it's there. There are ways. One of the things I was most impressed with my legislative director, who's now our legislative director, I was interviewing him at the time, is he had a really great idea that was brewing on federal loans. So school loans, tuition programs, that was going to be pilot programs run at the state level. Like, I really think there's something strong there where if we can look at it, see how it's worked, and bubble it up, there's enough bipartisan groups in Washington that we could infuse some of that. So that's the main message I was hoping to get across. So thank you. I'm sure I won't be everything to all people, Leslie. It's my mom's name. But that it is truly who I am. And, sometimes that type of person doesn't get a lot of attention in Washington. And I told my team, I said, you guys, I don't need to do anything bombastic. I just need to be consistent. And I need to be consistent and build a credible message. And over time, we will build that organically. So I really am trying to be someone that a type of politician that people can like. Christine?
Thanks. You prefer Blake or Representative Moore?
Yeah, Blake's great. Whatever. I've been called much worse.
Yeah, Christine, I'm up in Canada, so I kind of watch American politics from a distance. But I was really curious about your mission statement, actually, and where that came from, and whether that's been a lifelong thing or something that you were inspired to do for a certain reason, and also whether it's catching. Are you able to spread those mission statements throughout your I don't know, constituencies or your colleagues?
So it's very our team. So our team, yes. They were asked yesterday what the statement was, what our mission was at a little dinner, and then nobody had any paper in front of them, and they all said, "Oh, API. It's API. It's aspirational, pro-growth, and inclusive." And that concept came from actually Speaker Paul Ryan, who I got to meet with. He and I kind of talked about that. We talk about how to bring more people into the tent and that type of mentality. I can tell you what it's doing in the community. I just wrote an op-ed, and it's in the Deseret News, and it's, why I'm a Republican and how to regain momentum or how to rebuild or something like that. And it talks about specifics of this type of policy and how if we can keep the focus on what I believe is good for the country, I think there is a lot of areas that we're going to be able to agree. The mission statement, it excites me every time I read it. I can't change the way Washington works. I'm in a committee markup, and it's pretty much down the line vote. Republicans are yes and Democrats are no until the final passage. You have to go upstream to fix a lot of this stuff. Some of that goes into how we elect people, and what you're required to go about doing there. There's a lot in politics that you can fix. Good government structure will produce better outcomes, and there's lots of those types of things in play. It does feel like it's catching. Maybe am I convincing people's hearts and minds? Well, when the op-ed goes out, I get a lot of comments and people are saying, "Hey, this is the exact message we need. This is where we're at. That's what I believe in," and they feel emboldened to be like, "Okay, that's the kind of representative that I would want in that position." So it's growing, but a lot of work to do. Janis?
Hi, Representative Moore. Thanks very much, and thank you for your service. I'm with Sorensen Impact, and we recently published a series of white papers of policy proposals, one of which would be a mandatory requirement for a percentage of new federal formula funding be used for outcome payments. And one, I'm hoping we can share that with you. And two, I'm curious your thoughts about what is the appetite currently in Congress to require states to use some of their federal funding for outcome-based financing models?
Let me speak for Utah, and not authoritatively speaking for Utah, but there's a flush of funding right now because there is a lot of funding out there, right? And every time I meet with people, I'm not this they'll say, "Yeah, I know you didn't vote for it, but and I say, just please be thinking very strategically about how you're going to go about doing it." People are in this mode right now of, okay, what do we do? How do we go about doing it better? We have an influx of data. We see the private sector constantly improving, and they seem to, they seem to be excelling in multiple different facets. And what is their recipe for success? And there absolutely is going to be appetite. I know that Utahns across the board are really trying to think strategically about how you go about doing it. And if it was available and bite-sized, if you will, and sort of tangible on how to set up an outcome payment type of situation, the system, I think it's definitely there's an interest there. I'll say that. And it's a unique time right now, while there is a lot of people making decisions on what in the world we do. Let me relate it to ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. I was doing a project on Every Student Succeeds when it was kind of in that transition period where the federal government was starting to release their sort of block grants. And, this was decentralizing what was No Child Left Behind. And as they were decentralizing that, communities, school districts, municipalities, they were a little bit clueless on what they're supposed to be doing with it and how they were going to be using it. So as a firm, we're like, well, let's go and make sure we can, ingratiate ourselves and maybe be a resource to them. And as I got talking to a lot of people, they started to, they're like, we didn't really know what to do. So we just set up a bunch of town halls. We wanted to hear from parents and teachers and stakeholders what we were going to be willing to do. So when you find these opportunities where there is an influx of money, be bold and go after and inject and tell people you've got a good system. And I think people are willing to listen.
Great, thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions for Representative Moore?
There's one in the chat, Tiana.
Okay.
You want to read it?
Yes.
I'm curious to understand your stance on the climate emergency, and in respect to that, what's your position on the carbon tax for U.S.? Perfect. I'll be very clear about both of them. I was emboldened by Mr. John Curtis. He's a representative for Utah's 3rd district. When I was running and kind of finishing up the primary, or it was during the primary, I saw him do a town hall for Citizens Climate Lobby. And his willingness to admit and say, look, very openly, look, climate change is real and humans have a role in this. Since the Industrial Revolution, we have a role in this. Go to NASA's website. I mean, not all sources of information are going to be non-biased, and you go to NASA's website. It's very factual. It's got data. It talks about the acidity in our oceans. It talks about warming levels. It talks about everything, and it shows a timeline. Like, we have to be willing to address it and not put our head in the sand and address where we have an issue. So with respect to carbon tax, I will be very, very clear. I have a problem with the carbon dividend situation. And I know that Citizens Climate Lobby is very supportive of it. And I have a great relationship with folks in the Citizens Climate Lobby because I'm very transparent. I have major concerns at our ability as a government to distribute funds, because we're way too political beasts. We're far too political when we're in these roles. We are not objective. And one of the big concerns from stakeholder groups is that, we've got rural communities that are developing energy. And as we sit on the Wasatch Front, sorry if I talk too much about Utah, but as we sit in more of our urban areas, because I don't know who exactly and where everybody is, we have Canadians and everybody, we kind of get into a point where I've always lived in an urban situation and I'm taking for granted energy. And I'm like, yeah, I'm always going to kind of have it there. And I know there's being produced. I have a tough time with how it's ultimately going to be distributed. We are working through the Great American Outdoors Act right now. We are seeing a sort of version of what this could look like. And it's caused a lot of concerns for me. For Virginia to get $250 million and Utah, which has 5 beautiful national parks, not any money goes to that. 7 million goes to our public land area for BLM, Bureau of Land Management. I have concerns about how we can equitably go about distributing that. And that's what a carbon tax would need, to have a surety from across the board that it will be fair. And so that's where my hang up is. I meet with groups like ClearPath. If you want to know, exactly the way I feel, go to ClearPath. They are an organization that says, look, we are willing to go and find investors, and we are willing to go and create solutions with a reasonable timeline on how we can change up our grid system and how we can, incentivize players to come to this space and do good. Because there's ways to do it. The Republicans have been, it's tough. You put Republicans in a tough bind. They tend to represent more rural areas. They tend to represent energy producing areas. I'm the kind of person that says, before I go and, constantly focus on doing more fees to the energy producers, what can we as citizens do to conserve it better? COVID helped because we worked from home and our air quality in Utah was much better. But let's do this in a dual pronged way. Let's not just put all the pressure on production, because if we cut production and there will be a gap where we're only emboldening other areas of the globe that will not do it as well as we. Every single oil and gas company I've been to, they literally put me in front of their environmental solutions team almost first, and they talk about what they're doing with respect to the mandates or the benchmarks that they're trying to do, and they're exceeding them on their own, right? So this has to be a more balanced approach. And you're seeing many more Republicans come to the table. I think partly because there's been a strong push from Democrats, and Republicans are like, well, duh, we need to make sure we're at the table on this. And I love that we've seen that. And John Curtis has been somebody that's led that very well. And I'm kind of coming into this world willing to talk and engage on it. Natural gas powering more electric grid, those are good solutions in the interim. We have to be able to invest in hydrogen. Solar is going to be great. It's not going to cover everything, but where can we continue to make these investments? Some rural communities down in southern Utah, they're really being very responsible and finding new options. So we just have to give industry an opportunity to move in the right direction. And I'm encouraged to see more Republicans kind of come to the table on this.
Tiana, Kim had a question as well. Did we lose Tiana? I think Tiana's in and out. Kim, do you want to pose your question?
Question on HR 6, Dream and Promise Act. I'm on record as of saying very supportive of DACA. I've spoken to Orrin Hatch about this in particular. This particular legislation expanded it beyond what the original Obama era DACA definition was. And that was really concerning to a lot of people. And, in order for this to play out, Republicans and Democrats to come together on this, there has to be border measures taking place. I'm not saying we have to build a physical wall across the border entirely. There are areas that it would benefit. There are areas that surveillance and increased presence will help. But this is an issue that everybody is involved in now. And if I was going to direct you to how I feel about immigration, please go to the George W. Bush Institute, a former client in the social impact space, another area how it's impacted me in my current role. The Laura Collins, their team at the George W. Bush Institute in Dallas, Texas, has, in my opinion, the best framework that I think should have broad support. And I continually talk to members of colleagues of mine about my support for this type of messaging. The messaging is great. They're celebrating the immigrant workforce that we have. Utahns, every industry here is like, Blake, please fix H-2A and H-2B and J-1 visas so we can have enough workforce. If we're able to get our H-2A and H-2B situation figured out better, we will alleviate pressure on the border. We can still strengthen the border, and people will be able to come and work and benefit our economy. So I joined on to the Dignity proposal. It's a framework by Maria Salazar, and she's from Florida. She is very inclusive on the Hispanic community and wanting to make sure that we recognize it. That particular legislation was the reason why you didn't get more Republicans on it, was because it expanded the scope, and there wasn't any border measures. Those are the simple ways. But I have no problem, and I have not received 1 ounce of hesitation from constituents. We have to come together as Congress to be able to fix the issue of DACA. These people came here as children. They know no other country. They serve in our military. They work in our police forces. They're getting educated. They're productive members of our society. We have to give them confidence that they can be here. And I've been very vocal about that. If I can't be a part of the solution if I'm in the majority, and you come back to me with harsh criticism, because I am trying everything I can to get it so I can get more Republican support, so it can be a broader feel. That particular legislation, I don't think will pass the Senate because it doesn't have enough bipartisanship in there. And if we can get out of our own way and quit caring so much about image and actually get to proper policy, we can address the immigration crisis that we're facing in our country right now. So let me pause there. I hope that explains why I wasn't supportive, but what I am ultimately supportive of. That's the challenge that I face is when I vote against the Violence Against Women Act. No, I'm not a misogynist. That's not, I get a lot of letters and hate mail because of it. That's aptly named, but I supported the Stefanik bill that has been for years up to this point has been very bipartisan. And now that particular piece of legislation has lost that bipartisanship. And I hope to get some of that back.
Thank you.
You can tell I'm a little scarred at some of the hate mail I get every once in a while. I still have feelings, folks. I'm still a human being. I try not to read the comments too often, but you can't avoid it sometimes. I love these questions. You're excellent. So thank you all.
I don't want to interrupt the questions. If everyone's okay with it, I think we can just let this keep flowing. I just wanted to make a quick comment that throughout the conference as a whole, but even especially the last session we had, Congressman Moore, there was a big emphasis on the ability of data and evidence to transcend values, transcend ideological differences, et cetera, and transcend time even. We saw a bill that was started by Republican, enforced by a Democrat, reaffirmed by a Republican, et cetera. So this is great to hear this, and let us know how we can continue to give you that cover and that help to help move this through.
Yeah, I was thrilled when I met with Mr. Sorensen and he kind of said, hey, we'll have some legislative priorities. And now knowing your background and your general feel back there, we'll love to come to you. I have joined the Problem Solvers Caucus, the Bipartisan Working Group, Main Street Republicans, also Republican Study Committee, right? Like I am trying to get a broad sense. These relationships that I'm trying to build, I think will benefit, if as I continue to be back there and hopefully gain more influence. I think one key thing, the question I would always have is, hey, if I was in your shoes, I'd be like, hey, why don't we see more collaborative bipartisanship when the margins are 50-50 in the Senate and a 6-seat difference in the House? And the no-brainer is, yeah, it should have easily been the case. But when one party gets when one party gets the majority control, and like when you have a 50-50 and a vice president on the Dem side, you have a White House, Senate, and House that has one party kind of control. That is a factor that's not creating enough bipartisanship. Now, when the Republicans had it in 2017, some of the same accusations could happen. So if we would have had a Senate that was Republican, a House that was narrow margins in Dem, and maybe a Biden in the White House, I think you would have seen a little bit more. But there's another interesting concept that I just figured out. When there are narrow margins, it becomes a battle on who's going to be next, who's going to be majority next. And we have to obstruct versus not work together. And we have to put Republicans in tough binds and tough situations like the Violence Against Women Act that we know they're not going to vote for because of the Second Amendment issues that are involved with it. Like that's the reality. We as leadership is putting the other party in awkward situations, and you're seeing less of, you don't see as much as you would like, even though the margins are narrow. When there's like an 80-seat difference in the House, yeah, one party's kind of forced to work with the other, and you'll see more of that, like there was in the late 80s and the 90s. But now that the margins are so narrow, it's more of a power play. But there are so many. I'm on several groups that are really creating good relationships, and I've got 6 bills. In my first 6 months, we'll have 6 bills that'll be introduced that I'm the original sponsor. And they're all with Democrats, right? And so a lot of that is happening. Don't lose faith. There's really amazing people back there in Washington that are really trying to do good. And I hope that you'll find ways to interact with wherever you live in your own various groups. And if you're from Canada, yeah, you can kind of look at us like a reality TV show every once in a while. I get that.
Tiana, is your internet stable again? Yeah, go ahead, take over.
Yes. So yes, Zoom, I don't know what's going on today. But do we have any other questions? Thank you, Representative Moore, for those amazing insights. We have about 4 minutes. If we have any other general questions, or if Representative Moore, you want to make any closing remarks around data impact and metrics, we have a few minutes.
I would just say, as an offer and a suggestion, you have multiple committees. I'm on Armed Services, Natural Resources. We presented a bill, it's called the Forest Tech Improvement Act. It's a 5-year pilot program that's going to study the innovative technology opportunities for reforestation efforts. The coolest way to describe it is we're going to take drones and we're going to fire seed missiles down into forests and see what we can do to regenerate some of our forestation efforts. The fact that I'm on Armed Services and Natural Resources and I get to do a drone firing missiles that only helps people, like I'm really excited about that. So there are things there's a lot of studies that get proposed. John Curtis proposed a study about potential exploration of geothermal, right? It's a very clean energy potential resource. There was more of that than I expected coming to Congress of potential studies. So I would encourage you all, as you're getting active in your various locations, look at all the different committees. Financial services, there are lots of different ways to show how impact investing is being, is producing positive results. Transportation and infrastructure, oversight, judiciary. There are so many ways you could propose an option. I mean, this is brewing, but let's see how a school district does at a certain initiative, and then we can maybe bubble it up. I hope you feel emboldened that you can create change that way using sound, data-driven type of initiatives that could potentially bubble up and be a part of a solution.
Very cool. All right, well, I'm going to return you all to your 2 minutes before the main stage opens back up. So if you need to take a quick break or anything, we will reconvene back on the main stage with Jeff and Liz to have our final wrap up for the day. So thank you all for joining. Thank you, Representative Moore, for your amazing insights and for taking the time to really field all of the questions. So this was really great.
It was an honor. Thank you all.
It was great. Tell your team that we blew through our breakout session because everybody wanted to stay here with you and talk with you. So, but worth the time. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great one.
You too.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Jeff.